It is day 3 of Offensive Position Rankings week here on the channel. That means it is running back day today, and we have some really talented guys to talk about. There are some huge names at the top of this class that I'm sure most of you guys have heard of by now, and there are some lesser known names at the bottom of this class that maybe none of you have heard of that could still end up being really solid contributors in the league. So there's a lot of guys to go over today. Once again, it's separated out into tiers 1 through 4. And for everybody else that isn't covered in these tiers, if you want to get my thoughts on them as they come off the board, once again, go over to the Bootleg Football Podcast channel. That is my podcast with my buddy EJ. We are doing a live stream during all 3 days of the draft, 22 hours of content, no commercial breaks. We're hitting on every single pick. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, head on over to that channel, hit subscribe, notifications, all that kind of stuff. And with that being said, let's dive into these running back tiers, starting with tier 1. Tier 1 at running back for me is very similar to tight end in that I only have one guy in tier 1 this year. I think that he's just slightly elevated above the massive amounts of great talents that I have in tier 2. The separation here is not that large, but I did kind of want to highlight Kenneth Walker as my one tier 1 running back, because if I had to, kind of gun to my head, bet on any of these running backs this year, Kenneth Walker is going to be my guy. I know that he's a little bit small, actually not even a little bit small. He's a lot of bit small. He's 5'9", 211, which in terms of total percentile for size is, let's just say it's on the low end. He's pretty freaking small, but at the same time, he's got blazing speed. That 4.38 really shows up on tape. I mean, he absolutely pulls away from defenders. He burns angles all the time. His feet are incredible. Like, his stop-start agility is just downright insane. And when you throw that together with his power, his contact balance, his versatility as a receiver, his vision, I mean, he checks every single box other than size. He's a pretty tough guy to make a player comparison for, because there's not been a whole lot of successful running backs in the league that are shaped like him, but at the same time, there's not been a whole lot that run like him either. I think his explosiveness and everything that he brings to the table, it does kind of outweigh his short stature. I know there's a lot of people out there that see Breece Hall as the runaway RB1, and I totally understand why. He's also a phenomenal prospect, a great player in his own right. But I just can't watch Kenneth Walker tape without saying RB1 over and over again. The feet, the agility, the speed, the power, the balance, the receiving ability, everything is just... he's just everything. In terms of how high I think he's going to go in the draft, I do think that inevitably he will go in the second round, but that doesn't mean that he's not one of the 32 best players in this class. I do think that he is one of the top 32, just kind of when looking at positional importance, or what's the word, replaceability? Is that even a word? I think when you look at that for running backs and just kind of the state of the league and how successful teams draft, they don't take running backs in the first round. So he's going to go somewhere in the high second, maybe mid-second round at the latest, and he's going to be a phenomenal value at that point. In tier 2, I have a lot of exceptionally talented 3-down backs, and you can only be in this tier if you are a 3-down back. There's not really any, role players in this tier. You got to be able to do a little bit of everything, and all of them have extremely high ceilings. Again, I've got Breece Hall, who I mentioned earlier before, from Iowa State, Jerome Ford from Cincinnati, Rachaad White from ASU, Pierre Strong Jr. from South Dakota State, Keontae Ingram from USC via Texas from a transfer, and I got Ty Chandler, who was at Tennessee for 4 years and then transferred to North Carolina. The one common factor that all of these guys share is breakaway speed. All of them can absolutely score on any individual play. Jerome Ford, for instance, I think had at minimum 3, possibly 4 touchdowns of 75 yards or more, which is just nuts. Breece Hall was one of the most athletic running backs to ever test at the combine. If you look at relative athletic score from Kentley Platt, I believe he had the 7th ranked RAS in the last 20 years, which is just insane. Again, 4.3 speed, 40-inch in the vert, just a freak in every possible way. And he also has really good hands too. He made some pretty insane catches. I don't necessarily think he has the same lateral agility of Kenneth Walker, which is why Walker is above him, but man, it's pretty close. He's pretty good himself. And then we got Rachaad White, who is quote-unquote only 4.48, but I think that at least on tape, he looks a little bit faster than that. I think his burst to the corner is pretty special for a guy his size, And what really stands out for him, I think, is vision and that kind of one-cut slashing ability. Like, he gets north and south super quick on zone runs. And once he does clear that second level, again, the 4.4 speed is evident on tape. I think that 4.48 might have been on the low end. He looks a little bit more like low 4.4 to me. I know it's kind of splitting hairs here, but for a running back, it actually is pretty important. Either way, really good slashing zone running back, that one-cut style with speed, and he has really good contact balance. Like, every time he gets hit, he's always falling forward. So you're going to kind of get that mix of 3-yard run, 3-yard run, 3-yard run, and then 20-yard run. So I think there's a lot of consistency with Rachaad White that maybe some other backs in this class don't have because they don't have the same power. And then looking at Pierre Strong and Ty Chandler, I'll kind of group them in together because I see them as very similar players. A little bit on the lighter end, not as strong as Rachaad White or as Breece Hall or even as Jerome Ford, and certainly not as Kenneth Walker, but they both also bring that 4.3 speed element. If you get them on the edge, if you get them just one block in space, they can burn everybody else's angle and house it in an instant. They have great feet. I mean, phenomenal feet. And they also both catch the ball really well too. So I think in terms of stylistic comparisons, they're not Jamal Charles, but I think they play like Jamal Charles. It's just like a diet version of Jamal Charles, but I think they both kind of remind me of that stylistic comparison. I also think that Pierre Strong Jr. can be compared to Darren McFadden in terms of running style. He's a little bit more upright than Ty Chandler, and Chandler has like a pretty good forward lean into contact. Whereas again, Pierre Strong Jr., when he opens up, I mean, he's pretty much straight up and down like Darren McFadden. But in terms of stylistic comparison and role and all that kind of stuff, I think that both of them are going to be very intriguing change of pace backs at first because of that speed they bring. And I think they could eventually work into being full-time starters. Plus, I think they're both going to get third down work pretty early on as well as that change of pace guy because they both run routes really well, they both catch the ball really well, and quite frankly, there's maybe like 2 linebackers in the league that can run 4.3 and keep up with them in space, so yeah, they're a problem to handle. You can't really leave them one-on-one with any sort of backers. You're going to have to bracket them, and now all of a sudden you're dictating coverage for a running back, which then causes even more problems in coverage on the back end. So yeah, they're pretty important pieces to have. And then we have Keontae Ingram, who somebody made this comparison to me pretty recently. I think it was Matt Waldman, who I think he nailed it. And he's got a lot of Kareem Hunt to his game. He's a pretty sizable back, he's 220 plus pounds, but fantastic feet and agility for his size. Like when he puts his foot in the ground, he changes direction instantly. He's got great forward lean, great contact balance, does not have the same burst and long speed of honestly anybody else in this tier, but again, when you look at the size and you look at the balance and you look at the feet, the receiving ability, the vision, he's got a lot of Kareem Hunt to his game. So I think that he could eventually be one of these guys where, he starts off camp as RB3 and then, by October or November, kind of like Kareem Hunt when he was a rookie, all of a sudden he's getting, bell cow workload because he's built for it, if we're being honest, and he's got a lot of really, really good talent. So I think Keontae Ingram is a super underrated running back in this class. I know that tier 2 is probably going to be the highest you see him for, I don't know, anybody, but man, if Waldman is right, because I do agree with him, and he's even 75% of Kareem Hunt, he's going to be well worth the day 2 pick. I think he's a fantastic player. And then I do want to round it out by mentioning Jerome Ford as well, who I do have as a top 3 running back in this class. I have him as an equivalent grade to Breece Hall, because I do think that he does a lot of what Breece Hall does, which is, again, the long speed, the ability to take any ball to the house on any given down. But unlike Breece, I think he's a little bit more physical in terms of going north-south. Again, the footwork in traffic and just kind of picking and poking and, working his way through the garbage in the line of scrimmage, because not everything is always going to be blocked perfectly. I think he does that a little bit better than Breece. I think his stop-start is a little bit better than Breece. And I do think that, for lack of a better word, tenacity. I think he's got a little bit of that over Breece Hall as well. And this is nothing against Breece. I love Breece. He's my RB3. He's fantastic. But man, I put on Jerome Ford and I fell in love instantly. Like, it was hard for me to not just immediately love everything about his game. So this is not anti-Breece. Again, top 3 running back in the class. I just think that Jerome Ford very possibly could be top 2 running back. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it. Either way, tier 2 as a whole, all these guys are studs. I love every single one of them for their own unique reason. And I think, God willing, if they all go to the right situation, they could all get a significant amount of touches as rookies. And that's going to bring us to tier 3 of my rankings, which is where I kind of put the solid RB2s or high-end role players. You know, the guys that maybe don't have the same 3-down versatility as everybody else above them, but what they do really, really well. And that's going to be James Cook from Georgia, Tyler Beatty from Mizzou, Brian Robinson Jr. from Alabama, Dameon Pierce from Florida, Zamir White also from Georgia, Ty Davis Price from LSU, Jerry Neely from Ole Miss, and Isaiah Spiller from Texas A&M. So actually, now that I think about it, this is all SEC. Huh, I didn't even notice that. But yeah, all of these SEC running backs / high-end role players are going to be in my tier 3. I'll start off with James Cook, and also might as well do Zamir White from Georgia at the same time because they both shared the same backfield. James Cook is pretty much entirely just a receiver. I think in terms of role in the NFL, he's going to be your James White. He's going to be your, your third down back, the guy that you can put in the slot. If you're going to give him any carries at all, it might be like 5 or 6 a game if you want to run counter or you want to run a draw. I don't really see the between the tackles rushing ability. Like, super explosive, I'll give you that. Really fun player, lots of speed, lots of explosion, but very little physicality, very little tackle breaking ability. He's just kind of a one-dimensional player. But what he does as a receiver, I'll say that, he does extraordinarily well. I think he is really fun, but he's not a complete player. And then Zamir White is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. I don't think he has the same feet and hips of a lot of the other backs that are ranked above him, but man, he is a hammer. He gets downhill really, really quickly and violently. And if he can clear that first level, like if he can just hit that hole hard enough, have a linebacker, bounce off his thigh pad, like he's got legit 4.4 speed where he can house that thing. I don't think he has the same feet or hips, again, like a lot of the guys where he can just kind of create on his own. He is more of a guy that kind of has to have things blocked well for him. But man, if you block it well, he can take advantage of it. He's really, really explosive, at least vertically, not so laterally. But again, yeah, as an RB2, as the guy you bring in to, take 10 carries off your starter, he's going to be all fire and brimstone for those 10 touches. You could do a lot worse than Zamir White. And speaking of change of pace backs, by the way, we got Tyler Beatty and Jerry Neely, who are both kind of in the same realm of like undersized, slashing, outside zone type running backs where, they got the speed to press the edge, they got really good feet where they can get north-south quickly, but they're pretty small. And I don't mean small in the Kenneth Walker where it's like short but still thick. I mean a little bit more slender as well. So when they do get hit, they don't really fight through it as well as, say, Kenneth Walker does, but they've got phenomenal speed, explosiveness, really good vision, really good feet. They catch the ball really well. It's just a perfect change of pace type back. If you want to give him, 10 to 12 touches in one game, I'm totally cool with that. As soon as you start to get above 15, I don't know about that, but anywhere in that 10 to 12 range, you throw them on the field, again, you kind of get a little bit of a spark, you get some speed and explosiveness out of your backfield. That is kind of the ideal role, and I think they can be really good in that type of role. You also have Ty Davis Price from LSU and Isaiah Spiller from A&M, who are also kind of limited role players in my opinion, but in a totally different way. If you're in a backfield where your number one guy, your most dangerous running back is also kind of on the smaller end, like let's just say Alvin Kamara, where Alvin Kamara was the number one guy, but he's also not somebody that you want to have to give, 20 touches to, or at least kind of do more of a carry split to preserve him so that he can do what he does well. If he's your number one and you want a number two that does bring a little bit more of a hammer quality, that's going to be Ty Davis Price and Isaiah Spiller. Even though they can catch the ball, and I think that they can be a little bit useful in that role, that's not really what they do best. I think they get downhill, they're super physical, they've got some size to them. I think that, when it comes to the fourth quarter, if you got a lead, you don't want to have to rely on, say the Alvin Kamara types to grind down that clock. You want to give it to Ty Davis Price and Isaiah Spiller and, 4 yards at a time, go get yourself a win. I think that's what they're there to do. In addition to having a little bit more wiggle so you can give them the ball through the air, or you want to throw a screen, whatever, that's fine. It's not what they do best, but again, I think that kind of complementary hammer back type of role for a smaller number one, that's really where they're going to thrive. And then rounding out tier 3 here, we have Brian Robinson Jr. and Dameon Pierce, who, I'll be honest, I lied a little bit. We actually do have some 3-down backs in this tier, and it is going to be these two guys, Robinson and Pierce. But they're not quite the same explosive 3-down backs that you see in the top 2 tiers. It's more so I consider them 3-down backs, or somebody that you can leave on the field at all times because of how they pass protect and how functional they are as a receiver. They're not dominant as receivers. You don't necessarily have to game plan for it, but more importantly, they can pass protect. Not a lot of running backs coming out of college know how to pass protect and pass protect well, but both of these guys can do it, especially Brian Robinson Jr., who's probably the best pass protector in this class. I legitimately think he can go on day 2 just for that skill set alone, because it is a very in-demand skill set. And if you have a 220 plus pound running back that can grind you out in the fourth quarter, that can catch the ball really well, and can actually hold up against a blitzer and, give your quarterback time, that's really hard to find. Harder to find than you think, to be honest. And Dameon Pierce is the same kind of way. Again, does not have long speed. I think his short area quickness is really good for his size. He kind of looks like a cross between like Mike Tolbert and Michael Turner in terms of build. He's kind of got that like sentient bowling ball thing going, but he's really quick for his size, good pass protector, good receiver, really natural hands. And above all, he loves the violence of football. He is a scrappy as hell pass protector. He is a super hard-nosed runner between the tackles. Like, even when his helmet gets ripped off, he doesn't care. He's going to go back for round 2 and try to get it across the goal line. Just a very, very, very fun player to watch that I think every running backs coach is going to love because of how he plays the game. He is all gas, no brakes, tons of physicality, and he's willing to do the dirty work like keeping his quarterback clean. So tier 3, kind of bird's eye view here. Again, mostly RB2s and role players. There's a couple guys that I do feel comfortable with giving work on all 3 downs, but for the most part, they're going to have very niche skill sets, but be very good in those niche skill sets, which in the end, that's why most of these guys are going to be drafted probably before the 5th round, because whatever they do at a pretty high level. And then finishing it off here today, we have tier 4, which I'm labeling as developmental RB3s or limited role players. And that's going to be Abram Smith, Zaquandre White, Kennedy Brooks, Hassan Haskins, Sincere McCormick, Isaiah Pacheco, and Tyler Algier from BYU. And all of these guys likely will be drafted because they do at least one thing really well, but most of them are not super well-rounded. Maybe they're very, very niche in their role, but also are not quite as talented in that role as the guys in tier 3. So, these are the middle of day 3, late day 3. Some would consider them priority UDFA picks. Doesn't mean that they're bad football players. In fact, I think that they're all pretty good football players. They're just, like the tier implies, more limited than the people above them. We'll start with Abram Smith, Kennedy Brooks, and Hassan Haskins, who all kind of fall into that, RB2 hammer archetype. Abram Smith, I think, is the most explosive out of all of them, but he also might be the most linear. Like, he's really best kind of going in one direction. He's like a diet Zamir White. If you miss out on Zamir White, maybe go get Abram Smith. He's not really a violent cutter. He's more like a bender, I would say, where, if that lane is there, he can bend his way up into it and preserve all of his speed. And he kind of plays like a freight train, if that makes sense. Again, he's going to go on that one track, and if you're in the middle of that track, he's going to hit you, and it's going to hurt really hard. And he's going to be pretty tough to slow down, like a freight train. But man, he can't really deviate off that track. If he does, it's not going to go super well. So that's kind of what I compare him to of, if you miss out on these north-south hammerbacks from tier 2 or tier 3, go get Abram Smith, like middle of day 3, you'll be all right. And then Kennedy Brooks and Hassan Haskins are also kind of that RB2, bigger, physical hammerback style. And even though they don't bring the same long speed that Abram Smith does, I do think that they're more elusive, especially Kennedy Brooks. I mean, he is really hard to tackle. He's kind of got like a slippery shiftiness to him as a bigger back, but in the open field, man, he's not very fast. I'll kind of put it diplomatically there. He is kind of a one-speed guy. Tough to bring down, very fun player to watch because he breaks tackles like crazy. But when he's in the open field, like once he kind of clears that second level and you hope for somebody to pull away and kind of have that extra gear, He does not have that extra gear. So again, limited role player. And Hassan Haskins, I think, is going to be a similar kind of thing. You want a fourth quarter closer. You want a guy who can punch it in on short yardage situations or in the red zone. He's going to be your guy, but I don't really see the physicality, the lateral agility, the explosiveness, anything like that. He's going to be like a Sean Green type. There's nothing wrong with that. It just is what it is. And then the rest of these guys in tier 4 are all going to be of that change of pace variety that I talked about earlier, even though they all do it in kind of a different way. Quan White from South Carolina is maybe the most exciting out of all of them because there's a lot of potential there. We've barely seen him touch the football. Like in the last 2 years since he converted to running back, he's got less than 100 total touches on the ground. So there's not a whole lot to go off here, but just looking at how he moves on tape, you know, the really, really quick feet, explosive lateral ability, like his jump cut is pretty insane. And then kind of looking at what he did at the Senior Bowl as well as a receiver, using that lateral agility to separate in the one-on-ones, there's a lot of potential there. I think he's a very good athlete that maybe just doesn't really know what he's doing yet. But man, if you can maximize him, kind of put him as your RB3 for a while and have your running back coach go to work and just try to mold him over the years, you could really have something there. And you're going to get him super late on day 3 because, again, we've barely seen him on tape the last 2 years. So it's kind of worth the lotto ticket to me. Sincere McCormick is going to be the guy where, you know, if you miss out on Tyler Beatty or you miss out on Jerry and Ely, maybe to a degree James Cook in tier 3, Sincere McCormick is going to be the one that you target down in tier 4 super late in the draft. And even though I think that he's less well-rounded than those guys, like I don't think he even has the same power that Tyler Beatty does. Not that Tyler Beatty is like overwhelming power, but Sincere McCormick is a pretty small dude. Like he is almost exclusively a third down back or, you know, kind of a space player to me. Whereas Tyler Beatty, like if the starter went down and we had to give him 15 carries, I think that he could at least do it without completely imploding on himself. Sincere McCormick, I don't think he's built for that kind of punishment. So again, very fun change of pace back, really explosive, really fast, really effective as a receiver, but just too damn small for any sort of role that isn't that change of pace. He'll definitely have a job in the league, but it'll be a pretty limited job. And then Isaiah Pacheco and Tyler Algier, they're also going to be, you know, your RB2, your RB3, the guy that you fit into the rotation to take carries off everybody else. But they at least do bring something to the table where, again, worst case scenario, you have a whole bunch of injuries, you're in like a Dearness Johnson starting on Thursday night situation. Could you get through it with these guys as your RB3, just like the Browns got through it with Dearness Johnson? Absolutely, they could make it work. Pacheco, I think, has legit speed where if he breaks it, he can take it to the house, but I don't necessarily think he has the same power or the same wiggle as some of the guys, especially in tier 2. And keep in mind, I saw all these guys on the same Shrine Bowl field. Pacheco was there with Keontae Ingram and Ty Chandler and Pierre Strong, and I was like, man, he can really run. But just looking at wiggle and agility and vision and all the other stuff that kind of gets him to that spot where he can break it away, I thought the other guys did that first phase better. Like they can all navigate traffic, they can break tackles at the line of scrimmage, they can do all that stuff to get to space in the first place, at least more reliably than Isaiah Pacheco. He's more of a, you know, if it's blocked well and you get him that angle, he's gone, but getting him that angle is going to be a little bit more of a chore than for a lot of other backs in this class. Still a super fun player. I think that he has a ton of potential and he can absolutely outperform my assessment of him because the stuff that needs to be fixed is not exactly hard to fix, but hey, I'm just going off tape here. I'm going off what I saw, and I think that he does need a little bit of development, a little bit of seasoning, so to speak, in order to reach the potential that I think he has. And then we'll finish it off here with Tyler Algier, who is decidedly not as explosive as Isaiah Pacheco. He does not have the long speed. He does not have, you know, the shiftiness of Sincere McCormick. He doesn't have the hips of Zaquandre White or the power of Abram Smith. What he does have is vision. Like if I was qualifying the vision of all the backs in this class, he would probably be somewhere near the top. His ability to read the leverage of defenders and just anticipate where a hole is going to open before it opens, combined with his patience and his trust in hitting that hole because he knows it's going to open, like to me it just shows a very high level understanding of how zone blocking works. I think he clearly studies a lot. I think he probably talks to the offensive line coach. I think he watches a lot of film. Like he just gets it. He doesn't have the physical talent of honestly almost every other running back in this class. But it's the vision, it's the intelligence, it's the instinct, it's all that kind of intangible stuff that really draws me to him. I think that he could get drafted above every other running back in this tier just for that. And if he did get drafted above all of them, to be honest, I'd be totally okay with it. He is unlike any other back in this class because he does rely on things you can't measure in order to be productive. But man, he's fun. I really enjoyed watching him just because I could kind of see how he reads blocks and how he kind of processes defenses in real time. It was just a joy to watch for me. So again, tier 4 overall, we got a whole bunch of developmental players. We got limited role players. We got guys that'll stick on rosters and they all do at least one thing really well, but they don't do everything really well. And that, my friends, will do it for today. Those are my running back rankings for the year. Once again, separated out into tiers 1 through 4. There will be more guys that end up getting drafted than this because, quite frankly, every single year, day 3 is loaded with running backs, and a lot of UDFA running backs end up having a lot of success in the league as well. You look at Arian Foster, you look at James Robinson, I mean, the list goes on and on. There's always UDFA running backs that have success. So in the end, this running back class, like most running back classes, is going to have really talented players that go really high and really talented players that go really low, and their production might end up looking pretty similar. It just depends on where they get drafted or where they get signed to. That, in the end, is the main determining factor of success for a running back. Talent helps, but situation is kind of the driving force there. I hope you all enjoyed that for today. Once again, remember to come back tomorrow where we got offensive line rankings, both for offensive tackle and for the interior offensive line class. It is probably going to end up being our longest, meatiest episode out of all of them because we are covering so many different positions and so many different names. Might have like 30 to 40 total names that we go over, but it's probably why it's going to be a pretty good episode in my opinion. So I'll see you back here, same time, same place, and until then, cheers.